I'm Jessica Anne Pressler, and you've tuned into Your Traitor Within, a podcast that exposes the brutal truths of healing, self discovery, and breaking free from relentless patterns of self sabotage.
Hey everybody, my name is Anthony. You might recognize me as a guest from Your Trader Within podcast. I'm Jessica's producer and friend. Hi, Jessica.
How are you, Anthony?
I'm doing great. We're kind of switching the tables today, and I love it because we have had so many amazing guests on Your Trader Within, and I'm just so amazed and proud. And I would like to say surprise is an amazing emotion, but I'm not surprised because it's a great concept. And I love how so many people from professionals to friends to public figures have been able to not only relate to the concept, but be able to share their stories in different ways that really show that it's not a monolith. You know, the trader within exists in so many different facets and relationships and ways.
I agree. I've been really honored that people have been very open and vulnerable telling their stories. And yes, it shows up in so many different areas in people's lives and formed in different ways in people's lives. And people get it. I mean, I wanted it to be a tool so people would have that and they get it immediately. The moment I explain what it is, like, uh-huh, I absolutely have one. And then they're excited to tell their story.
Well, what have you learned most from the guests so far? Like, what's a common thread from these stories that you find to be something tangible?
Well, many of them have an inner voice. It's actually they hear their mother or saying you're never going to amount to anything. They hear these actual voices become their own voice.
Totally.
That was a common theme that showed up in their adult relationships or work experiences. Mine wasn't. Mine was more of a being, a way of thinking. But for some people, they really did actually have a voice that they had to counter, that they had to work on. And many of my guests did come on that came on the show actually understood. They were really happy to have a name, to name something that they had been dealing with their whole life. And many of them are either in the process of healing or have healed, but all recognize that this traitor within can pop up again, that it really doesn't go away 100%, but we learn to um, understand it, maybe embrace it because it's part of us, have compassion toward it and understanding, and then learn to let it go. And when triggered, learn the tools like in my Your Trader Within journal. They can learn the tools to not let it affect their life.
And I think what's interesting is people really do hear themselves like when they're talking, or maybe it's not them, you know what I mean? But I don't have a actual voice going along. It's more so of like a repetitive nature pattern. Is that how you feel too?
Exactly how I felt. I just learned, so for me, I learned mine showed up in my romantic relationships. So I learned
Mhm.
as a child that to feel safe, to not feel abandoned, which is what kept me feeling safe, I had to be the good girl. I had to be quiet. I had to deny whatever stuff was going on around me. I had to self-blame. I had to excuse and make stories up in order to excuse other people's behavior. And I took that into my romantic relationships, but it was just a thought process. I went into automatic mode. And what's interesting about with me, when I would get upset about something in my relationships, and I would have a moment which was healthy of, this is wrong, displeasure, or even anger, my traitor within wouldn't be a voice, but it would come in and I would suddenly say, then all that stuff would come up again, make excuses and all the stuff I just spoke about. So it wasn't so much a voice, it was just my behavior. It was just the way I was, the way I thought. It was so ingrained in me that it was just how I behaved in toxic relationships.
I felt the same way. And in some ways, listening to guests like Arci Grey or even Dr. Nadine, talking about that voice. I almost wish that I had one sometimes because I'm a good arguer and I could argue with that. It was so programmed in me, like it was in you in certain situations that I wish that I heard that. But something really interesting going back to Dr. Nay's episode.
Mhm.
Um, was kind of the reclaiming of her self-compassion because growing up, her inner voice was really, really created by her family, but then shattered a little bit by the Wolf of Wall Street. And there were toxic things coming from both her family and the pressure that was put on her and the Wolf of Wall Street. So it was almost like two traitor withins were formed.
And what was also interesting about her is she had a family who was very psychologically savvy. So she was getting good messages too.
Yeah.
But we also spoke about society.
Yeah.
And but yes, you can be very, very healthy and go into a relationship. And I believe also, and I don't always talk about this, but your traitor within can also be formed through trauma in an adult relationship as well.
Mhm.
Even if you are healthy, even if you're brought up with the right messaging and modeling, you can enter a relationship, let's just say with a narcissist, and they could give you those inner voices or that inner concept because they put you down so much that your traitor within can be formed later in life as well.
True. And going back to that as well, not only, later in life do things change, but definitions that we apply from childhood then to adulthood change. And a common theme, and a lot of the guests, especially, a lot of the fabulous ladies that have been on the podcast who end up being either public figures
Mhm.
or, working in some type of media conglomerate are the good girl narrative. And you've even talked about that, like being the good girl. Dr. Nay talked about it. Braunwyn talked about it. Arci talked about it. Marcy talked about it.
Mhm.
Um, and what it means to be that good girl and how that changes with age and how that inner voice can really grow with you.
Right. Well, what's interesting about the good girl narrative, it's nothing wrong about being the good girl unless you are losing yourself, unless
Mhm.
you are the good girl, which means other people get away with being abusive. Because, it's society that teaches you girls need to be good. Girls need to be good wives. Girls need to make everything better. We grow up thinking that we're supposed to and maybe it's changing a little bit, but we are in charge of making the family happy, our husbands happy. It's like, it's programmed into us, not just from our childhood family, but from society. And so I don't think it's an uncommon female, at least of my generation, or maybe, I don't know, but maybe with younger women, it's a little different, hopefully. But it's interesting about the traitor within is it could be a good attribute. Like it doesn't have to be a negative part of you. Meaning what makes it negative is it's when it's used in ways that harm you. So it is not a bad thing to be agreeable. It's not a bad thing to be able to be empathetic and understanding to other people.
People always say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But when you're protective of yourself and maybe your inner voice is a refusal to admission of that insanity, doing
Mhm.
something over and over again and even having it be chaotic can feel good. And maybe part of that for myself and reflecting back on my own episode was that shattering of the good boy.
Mm.
And I think that might be, unless, there's always going to be just kind of how John Graham just talked about on the podcast, intersections of toxic masculinity. But really, I think that what society has made being a good girl and a good boy into and what that means. And again, like you said, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's how it gets distorted or changed over time. I want to ask you, what's a piece of advice that somebody on your podcast gave to their younger self that really struck you?
Well, what came up, and actually, I think with the men more than the women, although I would probably believe the women would think this is also something that's very important, was the lack of listening to their inner voice. the intuition part, not the traitor within inner voice. I'm thinking of John Graham, who realized that he had this compassionate part of him that he ignored because he didn't want to be bullied. He wanted to be more like his, he saw his father being bullied. He was bullied. So he created this masculine piece. So he denied the compassionate, service-oriented part of him. But there was another gentleman also who spoke about ignoring his intuition. Some would say it's God. Some would say it's the universe. And he would push that down. And so he talked about going back in his childhood and saying, don't ignore that.
Mhm.
That's something, the trader within squashed it.
We can learn to ignore it, but if you're able to, like, have a certain amount of self-awareness to look at your trader within and say, hey, work with me here by looking at the facts that the trader within presents and saying, okay, let me look at that feeling and analyze it now from a realistic perspective. And if we can remove that emotion, that hurt, that pain, that trauma that affects us from being able to pinpoint the difference between the trader within and our real selves, that would be so, so helpful to be able to do. And I wonder if that's a concept that you as a, as a psychotherapist could expand on.
I agree because it's that stuff that prevents us from being our true self. And the traitor within is one of the stuff that is blocking us from getting there. And it's self-protective. I mean, again, the traitor within is there, it thinks it's protecting you. That part of us that's why I call it a traitor, because it comes to you as a friend, but it has tunnel vision. It can only see its narrow focus, maybe the focus that it had when you were a child or in that relationship. So the first step of understanding the part of you, the self-sabotaging part of you, the traitor within, is awareness. And then an acceptance that it exists. That's why I love journaling. I mean, whatever kind of journaling you do is really helpful because it's writing it down on paper and stepping away and being able to see it from the outside. And once you understand that you have it, then you can delve in deeper and figure out where it came from, and carefully, of course, because it normally many times comes out of feeling not safe.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's, and those self coping mechanisms are formed in order to keep a child primarily or, safe. And then we use it over and over again because that's what we know. And it's a big deal to understand this, but it's also empowering because you can do,
Mhm.
you can't change anyone else around you.
Mhm.
Do something about how you see the world, how because you get blinders on from the traitor within. So you can change how you see the world. You can change how you act in the world. You can change how you see other people and how you cope with or allow other people to behave a certain way around you. And so once you understand your traitor, once you understand what may have sabotaged your relationships, which may have sabotaged your ability to grow in a company, that you're
Mhm.
working, or the ability to show up as a friend or allow an abusive friend to stick around, you can see what you're doing and make a change. Again, you can't change another, so you can work on it yourself, but it takes time. And it's also about rewiring your brain. You've thought a certain way. Your voice has been saying the same thing for X amount of years, especially if it started in childhood. So it takes work because you've got to undo that voice. And sometimes that voice will come out and you'll have to say, hi there. I know you're here to help me, but it's not helpful anymore. See ya.
What's a listener response that you've gotten that has made you really excited or really positive about the future of the podcast and continuing forward?
Well, several things. One thing is, which I didn't really think about, was a listener who said, this actually not only helped me understand myself and changes I can make in my life, but I now understand why my mother behaved the way she behaved. I now have empathy and compassion toward her because I was so stuck in how she was treating me or how she was acting toward me, that I didn't have the compassion toward her. But now that I understand her, that she has a traitor within too, it just freed me. It freed her, of the feelings she had because this person had passed away. So she couldn't, work it out with her. But it made her feel more at peace about her mother. So that was something I didn't expect when I came up with this concept. And and then the other part was um, people felt empowered. They talked about the ability to now make a difference. So once they understood this, they said, "Oh, okay, now that I get it, I can now use exercises." Because what happens is the traitor within gets triggered. So now they, with an understanding of what their traitor within is, or who their traitor within is, or why it works the way it works, then they could, when they feel it coming and they getting triggered, they can do things to stop it, like breathing exercises or grounding exercises, or even sitting down and journaling, or splashing cold water on their face. And so then they could become less triggered. So it gives them something to do. It's empowering. It really is empowering. You can find your Trader Within journal by clicking the link in my bio.